Welcome back to our last segment on Exodus, Jewish immigration from Russia, 1881 to 1924. We've considered the world of the Jewish population in the 19th century, the growing expressions of anti-Semitism, and that explosion of violent pogroms in Russia, including in the Pale of Settlement. And then the Jewish response, including where they could escape to, which included the United States. And would the United States accept them? Yes, they would, and the many Jewish agencies helped in that matter, along with individuals. But the immigrants struggled a lot to get to the various seaports of Europe. It took them weeks or months to get to these places by walking and by trains. When they arrived at these ports, they had to wait for a ship, and they were already in a foreign land. Vera Gauditsa, pregnant, waited at a port in France. When we came to France, they put us in this place, and I was waiting there 8 days for the boat to land. They put us in some kind of storage room by the ocean, and you could hear the water at night. The toilet was in the floor, like an open sewer. I started to be sick there. And at night it was so cold there. It was February, and there were no mattresses. It was straw on the floor, and sheets on top. You do not know the language, and you have no money. Then they braved crowded and dismal conditions in steerage class aboard the ships across the Atlantic. On the German ship America, 2,000 passengers were spread between 3 decks. They were given bunk beds with straw mattresses. Washing was by cold seawater. No soap or towels, no dining area or public rooms, because every place was crammed with bunks for maximum profit. Food was a hash of grizzly beef and warm potatoes. Many ships had open troughs for toilets. People became sick not only from the motion but from the stench. We naturally were in steerage. Everyone had smelly food. The atmosphere was so thick and dense with smoke and bodily odors that your head itched, and when you went to scratch your head, you got lice in your hands. We had 6 weeks of that. We had good times, we had bad times. We had all kinds of things. But by this time we were immune to everything. Most of the people were in so much torture before they got on the boat, not just the examinations, but the life we had in general in Europe. And besides, that hope to be in America was so great and so sunny that it colored all the pain that we had during the trip. A great attitude. Most immigrants came through New York. From 1855 to 1890, Castle Garden off Manhattan was the station that you processed through. So the earliest Jewish refugees from Eastern Europe and Russia would have gone through Castle Garden. But the immigration surge led the government to build a large facility on Ellis Island. So from 1892 to 1924, Ellis Island processed 71% of all immigrants into the United States, or more than 12 million persons. And that's a conservative number. I've seen larger numbers than that. 1.8 million of those 12 million were Jews. And most of those, about 73% of them, came from Russia. I think this is to be considered a very successful and triumphant story, don't you think? And one that probably is not told or known enough. Today, the many Jewish persons in the United States who came from Eastern Europe and Russia in the 19th century and early 20th centuries, and those who descended from them, would probably love to express a hearty Toda Rabah, thank you very much, to the American Jews who were here already, who helped make these many journeys possible to the United States in those harrowing years. Well, let me say a final word about Ellis Island. After 1924, the visa system was developed, and Ellis Island suddenly became unnecessary. Ellis Island would be used for various functions for several decades until it finally closed on November 12, 1954. But thanks to a lot of individual and nonprofit generosity, the place has been restored as a museum and research center. Every person had an important story who came through Ellis Island or through one of the other processing centers. And of the many Jews that passed through Ellis Island, some went on to become well known. And here's a few. And again, this is not all immigrants. This is just through Ellis Island. Well, I see we have Isaac Asimov, who came in 1923. We've already talked about Irving Berlin. He arrived in 1893. Samuel Chotsunov, the Russian pianist. Albert Einstein arrived in 1921. Max Factor from Russia in 1906. Felix Frankfurter, Supreme Court Justice, arrived in 1894. Samuel Goldwyn from Poland, the famous movie producer. Vladimir Horowitz, the famous Russian pianist. Arthur Murray, who had dance studios that used to be popular all over the nation. Edward G. Robinson, a famous actor from Romania. Arthur Rubinstein, another pianist. Igor Sikorsky from Russia, an inventor, particularly of the helicopter. And here are some of my favorite photos of Jews from Eastern Europe or Russia. This famous picture from Ellis Island. Wow, 3, 6, 9, 12, 14 children. Wow. Another famous picture from Ellis Island. 2 orphans, 1921. And we have to include a Jewish grandmother in 1926 and a grandfather, 1905. This Russian family, another Russian Jewish family, and Jewish orphans arriving from Eastern Europe in 1921. Let me also note how the Jews from Eastern Europe mingled with the Jews here already and became great citizens. The Jewish community here became stronger, larger, and more diverse. They were glad to work the long hours and create a successful place for their family. I was thinking about the long-term results of moving from a 250,000 Jewish population in the United States to a 2.5 million population within 4 decades. Think of all those who fought for America in the First World War, the Great War. About 225,000 American Jews served in World War I, which was 8% of their total population. And about 550,000 American Jewish men and women served in World War II. 11,000 were killed. Think of how many of them were born from parents or grandparents who emigrated here from the Pale. Think of the difference this Jewish population made during the 1940s when the Jewish Holocaust raged in Europe. In 1942, there were 4.2 American Jews. As you might know, it was the American Jewish community that agitated vigorously to bring the news of the Jewish Holocaust from little snippets on the back pages of the newspaper to the front page. In dozens of ways, through writing, speaking, lobbying, the arts, the American Jewish community helped the world understand more of what was going on with the Holocaust. And we're talking about all European Jews at risk, not just from the East, and especially the Germanic Jews. So in conclusion, let me say that in the big picture, Russia and the United States traded places in terms of holding a Jewish population. In 2010, there were about 311,000 Jews in Russia and about 5.3 million in the United States, which is kind of close to what it used to be in reverse in 1881 when our story began. Well, thank you for joining me on this journey through 19th and 20th century Jewish history, focusing on this narrow topic of what I have dubbed an exodus from Russia and Eastern Europe, and the noble and inspirational story of the Jews who worked hard to bring their families to safety out of persecution, and of the American Jews who compassionately helped them to do so. Certainly an important and moving example of resilience and compassion for us today. Thanks very much.